Hi everyone, thanks for stopping by. Welcome to the channel. Today I want to talk to everyone about weapon handling. How do you make sure that the gun is not loaded? How do you load the gun when you're at the range? How do you grip the gun? How do you pull the trigger, stance, and so on? Now, before we go further into the video, I do want to say that the grip can be a much longer video. Talking about the grip can be much longer, but that is going to be a video for another time. Right now it's going to be super basic because this video is intended for those who haven't been to the range, who haven't shot a gun before, or who maybe have shot a gun years ago, didn't really know what they're doing, weren't being serious, it was just for fun. Now you're interested in purchasing your firearm, or you've already purchased your firearm and you're looking to get serious about shooting. So that's the purpose of this video. Okay, so checking to see that the gun is clear. When you first pick it up, you want to make sure that you are always pointing it in a safe direction in case of an accidental discharge. I never want to point the gun at anyone or anything that I'm not willing to destroy or that I'm not willing to shoot. And that includes even just passing my hand or any body part over the muzzle of the gun. Okay? Now this gun is safe and empty. Okay? So on that subject, here's what we're going to do. Pick up the gun, point it in the safe direction, keep your finger outside of the trigger guard and off of the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Identify if there's a magazine. If there is, you want to eject the magazine. But how do you do that? So on this HK VP9, it has a little paddle that you press down on. On other guns, like Glocks, a lot of Sigs, and so on, it's going to be a button. A magazine button, and here is what it looks like. Now I'm a lefty, so this button is on the right hand side for me to push it with my thumb. Traditionally or typically the button is going to be on the left side for right-handed shooters, but I switched it over, so you just simply press on that and the magazine drops. Now also guns are going to have a slide stop slide release that goes up and down. On this Sig 229, that's what it looks like right there. So that goes up. And what I want to do is I want to pull the slide to the rear while I'm pushing up on that. That's going to lock your slide to the rear. And then you can see if the gun is loaded or not. Now inside right here is the barrel. If there was a bullet in there, it would be very obvious instead of just a hole that's right there. Now on the HK VP9, this gun is fully ambidextrous, so the slide stop slide release on one side looks like this, and on the other side it's a little bit longer, but you can work it. So for this gun, I'm going to drop the magazine, and then if you see, I'm pushing it on one side and you can see it moving on the other. Let's see. There you go. So I'm going to pull the slide back. I'm going to push up on that slide stop slide release, and then you can check inside the chamber, inside the barrel, to make sure that the gun is unloaded. Okay, so loading the firearm. How do you load the gun? Well, we're going to use snap caps. All right, they are inert bullets, if you will. They're not real. They look like real bullets, but if this was a real bullet, it would have a primer. It would have a small little striking surface in the back, circular. That's what ignites the bullet. These are just steel caps. They also make these in, I believe, red plastic that you can see through. And I'm not trying to sell these or anything. It's just some that I picked up for the purpose of this video. I have no opinion on them. All right, so loading the magazine. All magazines are going to have this little lip or this little ramp that goes up, if you can see it. The metal part, okay? It goes up. So you want to take your bullet, take your magazine, and you want to place the back of the bullet right before that ramp, right in front of it, okay? And then press down. Once the bullet clears the ramp, if I can get it to focus. Once it clears that ramp, then I want to press back. Okay. Now the second round and all the following rounds, I'm going to have to either use my index finger to press down and then push with my other hand and back, or my thumb and down with the other hand and back. And just keep doing that until you've loaded the gun all the way. I'm trying to get this other bullet here. Or snap cap, I should say. Okay. So now once I'm actually ready to load the gun, I'm going to grip the magazine with my index finger running along the front part of the magazine and the base of the magazine in my palm. Sometimes the magazines can be a little bit longer, like if you're getting a 25 round magazine for whatever reason, or a 30 round magazine, then my index finger isn't going to be long enough to reach the top and to have the base of the magazine on my palm. What's most important is to have the base of the magazine on your thumb, because when you're going to actually load the gun, you're going to eventually remove your finger and then you're going to follow up with the palm, right? So what I want everyone to get into a habit right from the beginning is to load the firearm right here, okay? About here. Not here, not all the way out here, but about here. Just a natural bend in the elbows. Not down here by where your waist is and where you're now looking at the ground. The reason is, if you ever actually have to use the firearm to defend yourself and it comes to the point where you're having to reload for whatever reason, you don't want to get into the habit of loading down here, because then you're looking at the ground. And in the real life situation, the threat is going to be out there, out in front of you. So you want to be able to see when you're loading if the threat is coming back at you, because your heart's going to be racing. You're going to have a lot of adrenaline, probably more adrenaline in your system than you ever have. So even something this simple as loading this in might be hard. You might not make it. And what might seem like 1 or 2 seconds to you might actually be 5 or 6. And in that time, the bad guys can be running at you, whether it's one person or two or however many they are. So you want to keep an eye on the threat as you're loading. So if I do this and I'm looking at my threat, I can choose to move back or move laterally wherever it is that I need to. And if for whatever reason I can't do this in time and they're charging at me, then I can use the end or the muzzle of the gun to maybe strike them in the face or strike them in the ribs or strike them in the leg, right? Or I can get an extra tighter grip on the gun to make sure that it's not going to come out of my hands when the person tackles me. And also get a good grip on this so that when I get tackled to the ground, it's not going to go anywhere, right? So again, when you come up, try to load it always right here so that you can see your target, you can see what's going on in front of you. That's very, very important. Also make sure that you keep your finger off of the trigger until you are ready to shoot. You don't want to accidentally, be loading it this way, and then when you slam it in, you accidentally pull the trigger and now you have an accidental discharge into the ceiling or into the roof or up into the sky, and it comes down and who knows what happens to it. All right, so loading the gun. We're going to bring the gun up, as we already discussed. We're going to bring the gun up with my index finger right there on the base of the magazine in my palm. I'm going to insert it. Once my finger touches the bottom of the handgun right here in the magazine well, I'm going to peel it off, and then I'm going to open up my palm and I'm going to slam it. I also want to give it a little tug just to make sure that it's fully seated in and that it's locked in there. It's not going anywhere. Sometimes when you try to load a full magazine into a gun with the slide in its home configuration, right, without the slide being to the rear, without the slide being like this, it can be very, very hard for you to put that fully loaded magazine in there. And what can happen is that you think you fully loaded it, but you haven't. It's really maybe something like this. Okay, so you might think that you're ready to shoot, and you come up and you pull the trigger and nothing happens. And then you have to waste time doing either remedial action, which is tapping it, cracking it, and then coming back and shooting it, or the gun just might drop out and now it's on the ground and you don't have a bullet in the chamber and you haven't shot one round. So when you load, come up, slam it in, and give it a nice little tug just to make sure that it's fully seated in there. Now the other way that you can load the gun is if the slide is locked to the rear. This is probably how they're going to give you the gun when you're at the gun range. Before you get into the shooting bay and you get to your lane, it's going to be given to you like this. So you can use the slide stop slide release that we talked about earlier to also load the gun. So again, a snap cap. I'm going to load it, give it a little tug, and then I can push down on that slide stop slide release, and that'll load the gun. Now what you don't want to do is load the gun by pulling back on the slide and then guiding it back home, because then this happens. The gun will be out of battery and essentially inoperable. You can pull the trigger as much as you want, nothing's going to happen. What you need to do is then maybe just, give it a little hit, send that slide all the way home, and you should be good to go. If the gun is locked to the rear, just pull back, okay? Again, don't right it home. So just pull back as far as it goes and let it go. All right, so talking about grip, how do you grip the gun? So I want the webbing of my hand to come up as high as I possibly can right here, okay? I want it as high up so that you can't even fit a piece of paper in between my hand and that part of the gun, or that part of the grip, okay? And what I don't want to hold the gun is like this. I don't want this spacing. I don't want to hold it like that or any lower. By doing that, you're allowing the gun to recoil a heck of a lot more. When you have it all the way up here, you're using the mechanics of your arm, the webbing, to prevent it from rising that much and from flipping that much in your hand, okay? Now, I'm a lefty, so for the grip, we're gonna say dominant thumb is going to be over non-dominant thumb, laying flat and pointing forward. So I grip this. If you notice right here, this is the rest of the grip. I'm going to use that part of my hand, that part of my thumb, or my palm, I should say, to cover up and to wrap up the rest of the gun grip. I'm going to interlock my fingers, as you see here. And I'm going to try to create a wedge on the back as much as I possibly can with my palms. And then also the support hand, try to have it at about 45 degrees when you come down and grab the gun. And again, dominant thumb over non-dominant thumb, laying flat. Not crossed like this, not non-dominant over dominant and pushing down. It's dominant thumb over non-dominant thumb, pointed forward and laying flat. Okay? That's what you want to do. Now, pulling the trigger. How do you pull the trigger? Well, you don't want to squeeze the trigger. When you squeeze the trigger, then you start to drive the gun offline. And the other fingers are going to kind of help you do that. You kind of grip it and your hand tends to want to go in the opposite direction. So you want to think about pulling the trigger as straight to the rear as possible. If you could just move your finger like this, that's what you want to do. That's what you're imagining doing. Now you're going to use, let's see if I can get it to focus. You're going to use that part of your finger on the trigger, that first middle part. Try to lay it nice and flat. And again, pulling it straight to the rear. Try not squeezing the trigger. Also, try to have a little bit of space. Okay, try not having your trigger finger laying against the frame of the gun the entire time. When you're doing that, when you're pulling the trigger, it's going to drive the gun offline. So try to have a little space in between your trigger finger and the frame of the gun leading up to the trigger itself. Well, you can't really see it that way. Okay, so right there. All right, and while I have the gun unloaded, I do want to give you a little quick trick or tip into loading the firearm. If you look at it as I'm holding it, okay, it almost looks like there's a circle in my hand, right? Or like my hand is creating a circle. And now if you remember, what I told you is to load the magazine with your index finger straight running up the front. The reason being is you can do this all day long. I can close my eyes and I can do it as well. So keeping this in mind, it'll help you when actually wanting to load the gun. It's going to be a lot easier. You're going to be able to do it without looking at the gun itself. It's just going to be a lot easier, and that way you can keep your eyes on the threat in front of you or wherever it is that you need to. You can maybe even be looking at someone. It's just a guiding aid for you. Okay? All right, so now that you know how to grip the gun, let's talk about stance and then finally on sights. So stance. Your feet, you don't want your feet to be locked out. You want a little bend in your feet, a little bend in your knees. And after that, it really doesn't matter that much. I know that there's some instructors that'll get really picky and they'll say, oh, you're right-handed, so your left foot has to be forward, or your right foot has to be forward, or your feet have to be parallel. Here's the thing. If you ever actually have to get into a gunfight and you have to use the gun to defend yourself, you don't know if you're going to be in your car, if you're going to be sitting down, if you're going to have to lay down, if you're going to have to go down to your knees or your stomach or your back. You don't know if you're going to be coming around a wall or a corner, and if you're going to have to lead with your left or your right. So when I'm at the range, I'm trying every possible combination. I'm even stepping on my left tippy toe and barely even touching my right, and then doing the opposite. I've got my left foot forward, my right foot forward. I've got my feet as close together as they possibly can, and then I have my feet wider. For someone who's new, what I recommend is just getting that athletic stance where one foot is slightly in front of the other, whether it's your left foot forward or your right foot forward. I don't think it really matters. And you should definitely train for both as you progress in your firearms journey. So if my hands, let's pretend that they were feet, at the beginning, I would probably have my feet a little staggered, like this, okay? Or like this, and that bend. Now, also, you don't want to bend too far forward, okay? Where now your center of gravity is off, but you also don't want to be bending backward and thrusting your hips forward. You just want a slight bend and having that nice, comfortable, athletic stance. For your arms, you also don't want to lock them out. You just want to keep a nice, small bend in your arms, something comfortable. And it's really hard to describe over video because you might have longer hands, you might have longer arms, you might have shorter arms. It's just something nice and comfortable, a little bend in the elbows to also act as almost shock absorbers. And that's where also having a good grip on your firearm comes into play. Now the sights, when you bring the gun up, you don't want to move your head to line up with the sights. You want to bring the sights and the gun up to your eyes. If you don't know which is your dominant eye, one of the things that I've heard and that I've seen some people do is they'll go ahead and they'll cross their hands like this, having a little circle right here, and they'll pick something out in the distance that they want to focus on. So they'll do that, they'll focus through this hole on whatever it is that they want to focus on in the distance, and then they slowly start bringing it back while maintaining that image in focus. And then eventually you'll see that your hands come to your left or to your right eye, and that's how you can tell which is your dominant eye. So hopefully if you're right-handed, you're right eye dominant. If you're left-handed, you're left eye dominant. Hopefully you're not cross-eye dominant. If you are, then it's gonna be a little bit weird, because then you're gonna, instead of, like me, I'm left-handed, so I kind of bring the gun up to my left eye. If you're cross-eye dominant, then it's gonna be, you're gonna have to be slightly off. And yeah. All right, everyone, thanks for stopping by. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please make sure to like, comment, and if you didn't like it, oh well. Thanks for stopping by.